Sam Wilson here, Sam's Antique Motors. Today is about day 4 of COVID 2022. After 2.5 years, it finally caught up with me. So I've transferred the shop to the kitchen table, and I thought today would be a good opportunity to tear into this carburetor and see if we can figure out how to put it back together. And I got a handy dandy carburetor kit from the Carburetor Shop in Eldon, Missouri, and fortunately it doesn't come with any instructions. Lots of little pieces, no instructions. But this is a Stromberg WW, so it clearly says right here on the back of this. I'm not sure if you can see that, Stromberg WW, and it has a whole bunch of patent numbers. Most importantly, it has this little brass tag right here, and this brass tag has the numbers on it that are 2339951, and that little tag with that number date codes this carburetor to a 2-barrel V8 56. So this is the right carburetor for this 56 truck, and this came off of the motor that I dug out of a field in Alabama. And this carburetor is just completely caked up with dirt daubers and dirt, and the throttle body was open, and so I just went in and hit it with a glass bead to knock it off the outside. I covered up all the little holes so I didn't just blow black glass all in it, but it's going to come all the way apart, and then we'll figure out how to get it put back together, cleaned out. So whenever I take on one of these carburetors like this, because I've never done a Stromberg like this, I just I start off with taking a pile of photographs, and it seems that no matter how many photographs I take, at the end of the day, it's never enough. So and I always have something that I can't figure out how to get back together. So I would encourage you to just take as many photos. Digital photos, as you know, are cheap, and take as many as you can. This one appears to be relatively simple as far as linkages and pieces, especially on the outside. There's just not too many at all to go wrong with it. So and to get put back together. But this little deal is missing. This is the linkage from the accelerator pump down to the throttle body arm. I don't know what you call it, but the clip is missing. So hopefully that'll be in the kit. There's a little hole there, so I'm not sure if it's a tiny cotter pin. It doesn't seem like it has a ridge. No, it's just a tiny cotter pin, so that's missing. The accelerator pump is wore out, but definitely functions. So everything in here is actually, turning. So we should be able to get it. Be able to get it cleaned up. So I took kind of a battery of pictures all the way around, and now I'm just gonna kind of move in a little closer and see if I can start taking this apart. And I have a pile of Ziploc bags and a pile of bag tag labels here, and I got a towel here because I know there's going to be at least one, if not two, check balls in here somewhere, and those usually fall out and fall on the floor, and sometimes you don't know they're supposed to be in there. So probably the first thing to do is just see if we can get some of these easy pieces off of here. I brought a passel of tools from the shop over here. I'm sure it won't be enough, but we'll see. We'll see how that works out. There's a big old screw right here on this accelerator arm. And that's not coming loose at all. So probably gonna have to get some more equipment to get that off. this just so I know for sure that's how that linkage goes back on there. Looks like there's a little bitty tiny washer on the outside of this. I'm going to go ahead and just put this pin back in there. I want to take this rod and bead blast it, and then I'll re-cadmium plate that. And this is the idle adjustment screw, I believe. Yeah, so this comes up right there, and it's not even touching the deal. So what I usually do on these things is I take these and I count the turns to screw them in till they stop, and then I know how many to put it back on that setting. So that's a half, 1, half, 2, just it's about 1/8 of a turn more than 2. Now that's actually pretty easy to set. And see if we can get this other side off of here. Like someone has just put a piece of wire in this side. Probably not as effective as you would want it to be, especially since the little wire is just fragile and breaking off. This is probably something else to take a picture of, just so we know how that works. And it appears that this has just a turn. I think that's called an inverted flare for the gas inlet. And then it looks like this. Probably just has a notch in there somewhere. Yep, there's a little notch on this little pin in here, this little arm. And that just, there's no catch on it. It's just flattened, and so it goes in and turns, and that's what holds it in place. And I don't know exactly what kind of choke this is. I'm suspicious that this has a spring on the inside of this because it has 3 hold down clamps. So there's going to be something in there that has a, I suspect it's got a spring or something that when I pop this thing loose, it's going to want to bounce off of here, I imagine. So I think what I'm going to do is leave this one on. I think it'd probably be smart to just put an index mark on the side of this. I'll put a little mark there so I know I can get it back to where it was in the setting. Also, it wouldn't surprise me for this to just be completely full of dirt. Well, there is a spring. Wow, there's a whole bunch of little things in there. Boy, I got no idea what all those little deals are doing. There's a little pinwheel in there. I don't know if you can see that. There's little wheel, there's a little pin. So that clearly has a spring that's releasing up to pull that down. So it looks like it's just a kind of spring operated. There's the other piece of it here. So a little spring operated choke. That'd be a great time to take a picture of that. Make sure I can get that back in the same place. Okay, so there's a little nut on the back of this. Yep, there's a little nut back in there, and it looks like that holds that whole mechanism in place. Shackleton, as you can probably hear, is outside barking. He's been banished from the remote shop this afternoon. He's back on the prowl. He's in the mend after the hog attack. Put about a 3-inch gash in his right leg. I'm assuming that means he got his ass kicked. So we had to go get stitches. He got 12 stitches. And has been convalescing for the last week. I'm going to take a picture of this so I know which way this. So I know which way the crook goes. It goes to the outside. And then once I take that piece off, it lets this little arm shaft come out. Okay, so when that little shaft comes out, underneath that is a little cup. There's a little cup right there. I'll take a picture of that. So I know which way that little cup goes. Okay, and then there's another little piece in there. It's this piece. Alright, I'm gonna have to get a proper socket to get that off. It's not gonna just jump off of there. So my guess is looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4 screws in here, and these screws don't appear to ever have had a screwdriver on them, holding this lower base plate on. So I think I'm going to see if these will come out of here. Easy peasy. One. It's 2, and that's a slightly different size. And that's a slightly different size. So we got 2 long ones and 2 short ones. Those do. I'm going to put all this with this. Actually, I'm going to put all that in a separate bag, and I'll put that in a bag. Ooh, that just popped right off of there. Full of muck. Dirt daubers all the way in there. Still dirt daubers. And these are, I'm sure, I think this would be idle compensation jets. So I'm going to screw these in and then screw them back out. Maybe. No, that one is screwed all the way in. That's one. Huh. That does not look like that would have been a good setting to have one of these turned all the way in and one of these one out. I think when that goes back together, we're going to put them back in the traditional one turn out and then see what happens. Now I can't pull this shaft out unless I can pull these plates out, which I got to pull this thing off the end of this shaft to get that out. And this plate, this shaft has a fair amount of wear in it. It does not appear to have any wear on the choke end, but it has a fair amount of slop in this end, and that'll let a vacuum leak through there. So may have to figure out how to put a little bushing in that to get that fixed properly. Right, and at the bottom of this thing are two big screws. Not exactly sure what these do. Full of muck though. Looks like there's just two little jets down there. Possibly screwed in from the other side. There's dirt in all these holes, and there's dirt in here, and there's dirt down in here. There's dirt daubers living all in this thing. So, all right, let's see if we can pull this off. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hole for that. And a hole for this. That was that part about dropping stuff on the floor. Okay, now I can find out what that was to hit the floor. Looks like a check ball. Okay, so this little tiny ball, which I figured would be in there, especially since there's two in the kit that I now see, looks like was down in this little hole underneath this device. So that's a very special little screw that goes in there. It looks like it has a little hole. Yeah, there's a side hole in it that's all clogged up. So if you don't have a set of welding tip cleaners, now would probably be a good time to get you some. And these are little tiny, they're actually files, so you have to be really careful working on jets that you don't actually file the jet out and make the hole different, but you can reach up in there and knock all the dirt out anyway. Yeah. So I'm going to put that thing together. With that, so that we know those go together. I think that should let me take this top case off. Let me see if I can get a knife. See if I can get a knife to put in here and pry it apart. Appears to have done it. More goop. Okay, there's another little check ball down in the bottom of this accelerator deal. It's accelerator pump. And the rest of this is just the float, which looks like it has a tricky little spring in there. So I think I can drop this ball out. Yep. So there's the second little ball. Not exactly sure how that gets in there or gets out of there. So this accelerator pump has a little groove right there. So I'm assuming that that little groove is holding the retainer clip that lets all these springs come out of there. So I'm gonna have to get this thing off in order to be able to get this off. There's a little bitty like fiber washer here. Can't tell if that's fiber or metal. Looks like it's actually metal. So that's got some kind of little metal sealing washer. With the check valve. And then there's this little tiny spring here, which is kind of a pretty little spring. And then presumably this piece slides off of here. Oh, I see what's happening. All right, so there's a little silver washer up in there that's keeping it from popping out. Okay, once I pull that little, you have to pull this spring back. There's another little flat washer. And then this spring. So, accelerator pump, spring, flat washer, retainer clip. It goes in the groove. Another spring, washer, big spring, big end towards the pump, and then a sealing washer. So this would probably be a great time to put all that stuff in a bag. these pieces off. This thing is tight. There's no slop in it. So I'm not sure it's even necessary to take that off other than to get that plate out. There's little tiny screws in there, and those screws are usually flattened over on the back side to keep them from coming out, which means you have to kind of file them to get them to break loose, and then get new screws, because this little screw is underneath this piece right here. Now we're going to put this in the Chem Dip carb cleaner solution and let this clean all the dirt out of there as we can. I'm going to leave this on, so that's ready to go in the dip solution. And let's see what we have to do to get this float valve out of here. And there's a number 59 jet down in the bottom of this thing. May have to get a better screwdriver. Nope. Along with a bunch of dirt. This is a little spring-loaded jet right there. Problem appears to be a spring. There. I have no idea how that's going to get back in there. So this is a little asymmetrical spring. It's longer on one end than it is on the other. I don't know how to really get a picture of that. And that appears to just sit down in there and hold this float in. Oh, well, that's easy enough. Doesn't have anything in it. Doesn't appear to have any holes. We'll float that in some water and see if that holds water. So I think it'd be a good time to put all of that in a bag. There's a little jet in both of these that have nuts on them. But I'm not exactly sure how to get in there and get those out. Maybe blowing air through them, no problem. So that may be something that if we let it sit and soak, that it just cleans itself out. They don't need to be taken out. It's best when working at home to be sure and use your wife's best kitchen knives for this. Does a really good job. Fortunately, she's sick and not paying attention.
I heard that.
She wasn't that sick. Okay. I have this completely taken apart. Took probably about an hour to get it apart. And documented in so doing. I don't see anything really wrong with this other than it's just dirty. People think that carburetors wear out, but you would have to put thousands and thousands and thousands of miles through a carburetor to wear a jet out with just water flow. This is not Petra. So I think I'm going to drop this in the solution and let it sit. Following those instructions, I'm going to do a little bit of scrape in here to get as much of this gasket material off of here as I can. All these little passages underneath the gaskets are full of, believe it or not, like dirt daubers. I don't know how a dirt dauber winds its way into a little carburetor like this, but all these little passages have evidence that an animal has brought dirt in here. I mean, this is not just clogged up from running gunk. This is actually dirt in animal nests. I found rats living in the crankcase. I still cannot figure out how rats got inside the crankcase of this motor. That was all sealed up. And I don't know what you do about this little thing. I'm sure there's some ingenious way to pull this out, but I'm not sure that it needs to get pulled out. Except there's no air coming through that. I wonder if that. I'm assuming there's supposed to be some air coming through that, and it's not. So we'll put it in the deal. The only thing that bothers me is that this one piece over here is really loose, and I'm gonna have to file the back of these screws off to get these blades out, to get these out. So I'm a little nervous about this this sloppiness here, because I think that'll cause a vacuum leak. When I used to build Model A carburetors all the time, I had bushings, which I still have, and reamers to put in a new bushing in there and then ream it to the right size. So we just may have to try to make that work. And it will just really depend largely upon whether or not the shaft is worn or the casing is worn.
Download the Resto-Rat app today to begin managing, tracking, and documenting your restoration project.